LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two. Now listen. Today is 8 weeks since retiring from a day job I had for over 2 decades, and I'm not going to lie. It's been amazing. Before retiring, several well-meaning friends sent me a link to the same New York Times article called "What Happens to Your Brain When You Retire?" The article warns about cognitive decline, increased risk of depression due to feelings of worthlessness, and depressive symptoms. You certainly felt depressed after reading the article. And really, New York Times, you think spending my last year at work in hours of silly meetings about defining our group norms and setting ridiculous SMART goals was healthier than in retirement working in my garden or even taking a nap? Though I appreciated my dear friend's concerns, I was pretty sure I would be busier and more productive than ever, rather than turning into a cranky old one-piece jumper-wearing retiree screaming at my neighbors to get off my lawn. Okay, I already yell "get off my lawn" at some of the neighbors with dogs who don't have poop bags, but I haven't purchased the one-piece jumper. Not yet. I'm waiting for a sale. A first order of business and tip from the article was to prioritize physical activity, aka lose some damn weight already. I am no longer sitting on my rear end 40 hours a week and tethered to a laptop. I started by getting back to swimming in my local pool. It's an easy 6-mile drive door to diving board, and since I'm of a certain age, it only cost me 75 cents to swim. Such a deal! It takes me about an hour and 10 minutes to swim 1.5 miles. Now that equals 55 laps or 110 links. That's a lot of counting to keep track of. Then there's the pesky little fact that I really hate exercise. Now don't get me wrong. After I do it, I always feel better, and I'm glad I did it. But beforehand, I can think of a million excuses to stay home. One summer, when I was in college, my roommates and I met this very attractive University of Minnesota dental student at a party. He had model good looks, he was tall, and, of course, had the whitest teeth. Now, this was before Crest white strips or blue light bleaching at the local mall. Back then, all we had were these expensive, custom-made plastic denture trays that you filled with the most toxic bleach goop that burned your gums and sometimes got air bubbles in it, which would cause spotty whitening, making your poor teeth look like Swiss cheese. For weeks afterward, you'd take a sip of lukewarm water, and it felt like your poor teeth were being zapped in an electric chair, with your only crime being vanity. Oh, what we did back then for glamour. My boyfriend, did I mention that out of me and my roomies at that fateful party, I was the one who ended up with him? He explained that his white teeth were a result of brushing his teeth with Comet, as in you clean your sink with it. What? He said, yeah, my professor told us about it and it really works. Just don't swallow it. Sure, yeah, I'll try to remember that part. I don't even remember the guy's name. It didn't last long. You see, he was a jogger, and that's why he was in such great shape. He would put on his Sony Walkman and go jogging for hours in the hot, humid Minnesota summers, listening to Pat Benatar and Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Of course, he thought it would be great if we jogged together as a complement to our other dating activities. I was actually fine with just sticking to those. Sure, yeah, I jog. I can do that. Now, I love long walks, and I can still get 4 miles in at a brisk 16-minute mile. But jogging, even then I hated it. But I wanted this relationship to last. So Jeff, that's his name, Jeff, would pop by my apartment at 7 Corners. I'd have my blue Ocean Pacific short shorts on and an Olivia Newton-John headband, and we'd go jogging across the bridge, through campus, and back over the Mississippi. It was agony. All I could think of was the pain, the sweat pouring down my face, the back of my neck, and the crack of my ass. He'd be talking to me, and I could barely breathe, let alone answer a question. The hot dentist-to-be and I didn't last long. I don't recall any drama. He just jogged off into the sunset, container of Comet sink cleanser in hand. I moved on to find somebody less physically active. Now, here I am, decades later. I'm back swimming and trying to find a creative way to keep track of my 110 lengths in the pool. I decide to break them up and count 10 laps at a time. 1 1, 1 2, 1 3, etc. And on 1 5, I do a lap of breaststroke to break things up. Once I get to 1 10, I do another lap of breaststroke and start all over, 2 1, 2 2, and so on. Once I have reached 6 5, I have completed my 1.5 miles. One of the things my ex used to say about his jogging was how he was in the zone once he got going. That never happened to me while jogging. But when swimming, I first get into my lap counting mojo, aka left brain, and amazingly, in about 5 laps or so, my mind begins wandering to more creative thoughts, aka right brain. Ha! I am now in the zone and my brain begins multitasking. While in my zone, I think about all the projects I put off prior to retirement. A big one is getting rid of at least a dozen boxes containing letters, journals, old photos, travel brochures, you name it. All those years of working, I said, someday I will get through these boxes, but never seemed to. We don't have a lot of storage room, thankfully, so a few boxes quickly looks like borderline hoarding. In the house I grew up back in Urbandale, Iowa, our next-door neighbor Lois went off the deep end after her husband left her for another woman. She got to keep the house, but became a hoarder of epic proportions. You go over and peek in her living room window, and it was completely stacked with boxes and piles of newspapers with a small pathway that went from the door to her chair. She had holes in her roof, and during cocktail hour on my mom's deck, everybody would be entertained by families of raccoons coming and going from the holes in Lois's roof. It was like the projects for nocturnal mammals. I've always prided myself on traveling through life without a lot of extra stuff. During COVID, however, I began to exhibit strange behavior. I would never consider myself a hoarder. I hate shopping. Shopping for what I need and whatever is on the list is fine, but to go and saunter up and down aisles? Oh my God, just shoot me. I can get in and out of Costco with a full list in 15 minutes. That, of course, can take longer if they don't have any rotisserie chickens ready. Then you have to stand waiting with everybody else, and once they start sending the chickens out, pandemonium ensues. It can get ugly, let me tell you. Most people will take just one, but there will be the chicken hoarders who are snatching up 2 or 3 or more. It looks like a UNICEF truck distributing food to a famished village. Mayo Clinic says, hoarding disorder is an ongoing difficulty throwing away or parting with possessions because you believe you need to save them. You may experience distress at the thought of getting rid of the items. Now, during COVID, I found myself stocking up on, hoarding basic supplies, the usual things like toilet paper and Kleenex, dog food, but other odd things like mini 3-packs of Worcestershire sauce, a box containing 18 boxes of Kraft macaroni and cheese, something I don't even eat as an adult, 18 bottles of red wine vinegar, and a food sealer machine with extra food sealer bags, which I have never used. When my friend Heather's house burned down, she and her husband had to set up a new kitchen in a rental. I offered her some of my hoarded items. She said, "How many Worcestershire sauces do you have?" Defensively, I said, 9. But hey, they don't expire for 2 more years. It was getting so bad I had to use the grabber just to retrieve a screwdriver from the toolbox because I couldn't reach over all the stuff I was hoarding. Obviously, I was out of control. I faced my newfound addiction head on and began pulling all this crap out of the garage and piling it in the yard just to take a visual inventory. Oh my Lord, I was so ashamed at how far I had sunk. I took a picture of everything piled up and it was the size of a Honda Civic. Truly, I thought, what has become of me? I finally got all the backup food down to a reasonable amount, but all my old boxes needed to be dealt with and I just wasn't getting around to it. We had a dear friend, an actress who died at 88 years old a couple of months ago. Bill was her primary advocate the last 4 years as her health and sadly her mind deteriorated. We then had her pile of boxes in addition to my pile of boxes. Now, we didn't have plans this past Memorial Day, so I informed Bill we were going through our friends' boxes. This took about 8 hours over the whole weekend. She had wonderful things in those boxes from her days on Broadway. She also had some things that she probably didn't ever want anybody to see. She had a picture of her and this handsome man when they were both very young, and on the back she wrote, "The only true love of my life, but I gave him up for a career." Once we were done with her boxes, I began to think, if I croak, God knows who will be reading some of my very personal papers. Thankfully, I used naughty acronyms in my journals, which kept some things somewhat private. MS means massive sex, and SOW means slept over with, and then I'd put their initials. Since I am now retired, I have no excuse not to dive in and tackle this sordid project. So I began scanning and rereading the debauchery of my early 20s. Good God, this reads like the diary of a Twin Cities hooker. My local pool just switched to the summer schedule for lap swimming, which means you can only swim laps 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., and then all of the children and mothers arrive to pee in the pool the rest of the day. I have other options of places to swim, but not as convenient, and certainly not for 75 cents. I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning, aware that the pool was opening at 6. As usual, I didn't want to do it and thought of every excuse not to. Bill was up and asked why I was going so early. I said, I'm up. This is my one shot to swim today. And besides, what would Katharine Hepburn do? We both agreed. She'd swim. So, as the sun rose this morning, I was one of 2 people in the pool for the first hour, and it was lovely. I kept my lap count and made it into the zone and was home before the sun had fully risen. I now had an entire day to fill with other things I could do now since retired. I made myself some breakfast, and in cleaning up the kitchen, I spot a container of Comet under my sink. Could I? No. How ridiculous. But Crest White Strips are really pricey these days. LOL take 2. LOL take 2. LOL take 2.